Hello, everybody, and welcome to Noor Riyadh. My name is Tara Al I'm an independent curator residing here in Saudi, and I'll be moderating tonight's Noor Talk as part of Noor Riyadh's public activations and learning programs. Just to give you a brief about Noor Riyadh is one of the major celebrations under the 2019 established Riyadh Art Program, which was established in 2019, as I said, under the vision of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. It's a really exciting initiative that I'm really happy to be a part of. And it is a city-wide festival of light art, which unites Saudi artists with international artists. And its mission is to transform the city into an open-air gallery. It aims also to nurture curiosity, creativity, and public interaction here in Saudi. And the theme of the first edition is Under One Sky. It alludes to togetherness and the universal impulse to gather around light and be inspired in unison, which I hope we can do tonight as well. I'm going to be introducing tonight's kind of theme. The conversation is Synth Deck to Gallery Wall, and it's addressing the creative and technological relationship that sound can have with light, as well as other materials that we live with daily. From the early days, actually, there has been a really strong and symbiotic relationship and bond between electronic dance music and light art. Light is even sometimes referred to as the soul of electronic music. Not only do light and sound physically function in similar ways, but also when they're brought together, sometimes we kind of feel like the laws of physics have been broken. Our emotions are heightened, our feelings and sensations and perception of time and space changes. And we're going to get a deeper understanding of how that might happen with today's experts in this field. So without further ado, I'd like to say hello to Nasser al-Shumamri, Christopher Bauder, and also Bruno Zamberlin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to briefly introduce Nasser al-Shumamri. He is an audiovisual artist and goes by the alias Desert Fish. The reason for that name is because he represents his Najdi roots, but he also represents where he resides on the Red Sea. He is the CEO of Desert Dream Studio, and he engages in the rising electronic music scene as a composer here in Saudi. He's a visual artist and studio operator of Desert Dream Studio, which he opened and founded himself, where he serves the media industry, corporate clients, art galleries, and artists. We're going to hear more about that when we speak to Nasser. Christopher Bauder is an artist, a designer, and the CEO and creative director of White Void, which was founded in 2004. And he specializes on interactivity, media, and space. Christopher is best known for his 2014 Berlin citywide light installation. Let's see if I say this correctly, Lichtgrenze. And thank you. His collaborative project with DJ and producer Kanding Ray, titled Scholar, which an edition of is with us here in Noor Riyadh. I really urge everyone to go and see it if you haven't. We're going to talk more about that installation today. His installations, just to say, have been shown all around the world, and he might mention that when he shows us his projects. Bruno Zamborlin is an entrepreneur and founder of Hypersurfaces, which is a London-based technology company, and it uses AI to convert any object into an intelligent hypersurface. Bruno is a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence and human technology interaction, and his work focuses on employing AI and sensors to transform ordinary objects into hyper interfaces. So excited to have all of you here with us today. I'm going to start with you, Bruno. Hi, Bruno.
Hello. Hi, Tara. Cheers. Thank you very much for having me here.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
So,
yes. Can I reintroduce you again? Because there's something I haven't said in your bio, which I'd like to open up with for this question. So I did mention hypersurfaces, but I didn't mention that this was actually a continuation of an earlier kind of technology that you started called Mujis, right?
Absolutely.
And this is a sensor that transforms any object into a musical instrument. It's been sold over 50,000 times, like the units of it, which is amazing. And a lot of artists have used it as well. Like one of my favorites, Imogen Heap. Could you please show us some of your projects that employ both of these technologies, and tell us more about them, please.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for having me here. Absolutely. So I am an artificial intelligence researcher. I am a sound artist and an entrepreneur as well. And yeah, my work involves this idea of transforming physical objects and surfaces around us into sound and light sculptures that people can play with like they were instruments effectively, as well as employing AI to make them intelligent, to make them aware of events that happen around them. So the idea here is to engage people and to place them in charge in a condition of control of the sound creation and the control of digital media, and also to look, I guess, at public spaces and the world around us with different eyes, and perhaps also to notice things that we couldn't really notice before, and somehow to tell a story of a place through the objects and the surfaces that compose this place. So let's see another example here of this very same idea.
We present this audiovisual interactive installation we realized with Mad Architects for Audi City Lab 2018, where we placed 10 of our Mojis smart sensors in this 2,500 square meter space under the catwalk and onto the cars. And as you know, vibrations are everywhere, and every time we interact with something physical, then we cause a vibration. So our unique technology enables to track the different actions that visitors perform thanks to these vibrations, such as their footsteps and interacting with their hands onto the cars. And every action detected by our AI algorithm is, for this special occasion, converted into a series of musical and lighting events in real time. So when there are no visitors, then the space is kind of quiet. And then when they walk and they start interacting with the space around them, then the installation becomes kind of alive. And the music and the light outcome is unpredictable because it depends completely on the actions that the visitors perform. It is an immersive installation where the sound of the nature is blended with various mechanical sounds as a metaphor of technology disappearing into nature.
So I guess, how is this possible? How does this technology works? Well, this technology is based on the fact that every time we interact or we touch anything around us, we actually create a tiny vibration, which most of the time we cannot really hear. But it is possible to apply tiny sensors which convert this vibration into digital information, which can be used to generate musical sounds and interactive lights, and also to control media. And this is really the technology behind my first venture, Mojis. And then also now with hypersurfaces, as part of the work of my startup, we also apply specific artificial intelligence algorithms that can effectively listen in to these vibrations and can be trained so as to know exactly what events happen on these surfaces. So whether it's someone touching, or is a footstep, or is someone is falling, or is a gust of wind, or a raindrop, like literally anything can be recognized by this technology, effectively making the surfaces aware of the context that they are in. So here is one last video for this very brief presentation. It's a performance where we place these metal ropes across this gigantic and beautiful space. It was the Royal Palace of Venaria in Italy, and asked two performers to play it as if the space were a big performance tool.
That's so cool.
Thank you.
I have a question that I think might apply to you and everybody else, so I'll leave it to the discussion. But I do have, there's something popped into my mind actually while I was seeing all of this, which is I'd kind of describe you as, I don't know if this is wrong or right, but like a creative innovator. So you're an artist who kind of also works within the business world, and like you cross over between independent and commercial spaces. What would you say, like what advice would you give people who are also innovators or creatives that are sort of afraid to take their passion further because they're afraid of the market, they're afraid to lose their creative, like spirit or whatever?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I think they are right.
Okay.
I mean, it's I personally do what I do because I want to change people's life. I want to go beyond that temporary kind of exhibition or event, and I actually want to produce something that then can not only be experienced and used by people, but also can inform whoever is gonna come after me, next to me, like to actually do something new on top of what I've done. And I come from the academic world, so that's kind of how I think. But it's definitely true that when you have a startup, there's of course it depends on what startups and what you do, but there's like a tons of different things that you have to think of that are kind of the opposite of making art, because making art is always about yourself and expressing what you have inside you, whereas business and making something that people can use, can enjoy is quite different.
So basically what I understand is, like to keep the balance, it's important to stay curious and to not just think of the self, but also think of who's going to come next. Like those are things that keep you grounded when you deal with the struggle?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I really just wanted to hear that from you. Thank you so much, Bruno. I'm going to move on to Christopher right now. Hi, Christopher. How are you?
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It really is. I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the question. You have one of your works is in Noor Riyadh, Scholar. It's a new edition of it. I just wanted to say that, you know, and you can add on to this if I'm missing something, that your practice focuses on the translation of sound bits and bytes into objects and the environment, and also vice versa. And maybe the last that I know is that it's inspired by an interaction of space, light, music, and objects. So I guess you're going to talk to us about all of that in the context of Scholar, and maybe also how Scholar is different in Riyadh, perhaps.
Yeah, thanks. I think since Scholar is exhibited in Riyadh at the moment, and by the way, it's at the Riyadh Front Mall, so if you want to go there, please head out there. I will take it as an example to a bit explain of what I'm doing. Can you maybe have the first slide, please? So yeah, basically light as a material, that's my thing. So I'm using light, which is something that you cannot touch. You cannot really like control it in a very good way. It's very ephemeral. It's like fleeting. And I'm trying to make sculptures out of it, sculptures that are in motion, sculptures that you can step into. They have kind of architectural dimension, but they're all made out of nothing, basically. So if you have the next slide, you can see an example. So yeah, this is one scene out of Scholar. Scholar is not just a static light piece. It's a 35-minute experience. So it's changing its appearance. And I'm using something out of the event industry. It's a moving light, but I'm using it in a way that I combine it with kinetic mirrors. This is something that I also invent and produce. And by doing so, I can basically bend the light in space. I can redirect the beams. I can, of course, change color and beam shape and so on. And that's all combined with my collaborator, Kanding Ray's electronic soundtrack. And so we're using those combinations of the space itself, which we prefer industrial spaces as a background, the light, the motion, and the music to create, as I hope, very profound basic emotions. Can you show the next slide, please? Yeah, that's me, obviously, and my collaborator, Kanding Ray. He's a musician originally from France, and we met on the Light Festival, I think in Belgium, and where it clicked immediately. I'm a big fan of his music. I'm a techno kid, basically. I grew up in the underground clubs of Berlin in the 90s, and I'm also a big fan of Kanding Ray's. And so we started together to develop Scala as a collaborative piece. So I do visual sketches, he's doing musical sketches, and we compare and we combine. And we had a rough guideline. So we used 8 basic human emotions and we tried to illustrate them. Maybe the next slide you can show. We tried to illustrate them with very abstract means, with the motion, with the light, with the color, and of course with the sound. And we have a surround sound system. And by controlling those parameters, we try to evoke basic emotions. For example, we have one scene that looks like the sun. So we have golden yellow beams. We have warm colors. We have a major tonality, very simple synth sound, very emotional. And it tries to bring you into a kind of positive or even happy state. And we have other scenes that are aggressive, that are in a minor tonality. They have heavy beats, disturbing, flashing lights. So we're trying to make you a bit aggressive or angry. So we're trying to evoke pictures in your mind that you connect with one of your emotions. Maybe we show a short piece of the video to kind of illustrate how this works all in motion and in animation. Yeah, maybe you can mute the sound a little bit. Thank you. So yeah, while the movie is running in the background, I maybe explain a little bit about the technology behind it. I mean, it's very heavily based on technology. I heard AI before and so on. Yeah, we also use a lot of software. We have a huge network that is kind of connecting all those operator modules. We have 90 moving lights distributed along 3 walls and on 3 poles in the middle of the audience that we call totems. We have 60 mirrors, and each mirror has about 300 individual LED pixels in the frame that we can also control individually. So we have a lot of means and options to do very abstract combinations of light, motion, and sound. And sometimes what we are creating is beyond what you can actually imagine. So as you can imagine, it's very difficult to conceive such a piece. How do you come up with such complex pattern? How do you draw them up before? How do you storyboard? So of course, we're using a lot of software also before that. We have our own control software that we also have included a 3D simulation, so we can simulate the whole array before, and we can bring parts of the animation already together with the music. The music is coming from Ableton Live. So Ableton Live is a real-time sound software, and that gives us the opportunity to connect both systems in a very tight way. So if there's a beat running in Cunding Ray's Ableton track, we can get every MIDI note from that beat and we transfer it directly into a light on-off, color change, direction change, beam shape, and whatever. So it also means when we, as you can see on some of the pictures, these are our live performances. So we're also sometimes performing the piece live, which means we are really at the controls and we can change all the parameters in real time. You see some of my first sketches here where I'm trying to sketch out patterns and bring them in an order and kind of figure out what would look good and what maybe doesn't work that well. And I have basically a printout of the 3D arrangement to sketch in. Here you see our very first test where I had the idea, I want to reflect the beams with a mirror in space, but does that actually work? And what kind of mirror do I need and how do I move it and so on? This was the very first test in our office, which was very successful. And here you see on the left side, this is our 3D simulation. It's our own software called KLC, Kinetic Lights Control. Kinetic Lights, because this that we are using to move those mirrors in space. So it's a company, I work as an artist, but I also have this company called Kinetic Lights where we produce those motor systems. Here you can see the motor systems and the mirrors connected, hanging on the truss. So this is something that we developed, or me as an artist, I had a necessity for these synchronized motors, but they didn't exist. So I started to produce them myself and engineer them, and I hired people to do that. And that developed into its own company, and we are selling and renting them. We have them in large clubs in Las Vegas, for example. In Hakkasan Club, we have a huge installation all over the world, basically. And this also gives me the opportunity to experiment with such a big amount of complex systems, which would be otherwise hardly to afford. And as you can see, we have very big locations where we perform Scalar. So this is Kraftwerk in Berlin, a very old power plant, empty power plant space. So I like the contrast between the modern, very futuristic, very kind of alien technology and the combination with very old industrial monuments, basically. You also have a bit of an idea of the scale. So the full Scala show is, I think, something like 100 by 40 by 20 meters in scale. And in Riyadh, we show a little bit smaller version of that. Here you see a bit of our control booth, so multiple computer systems running, they're all networked, talking to each other in real time, running different softwares that are basically coordinating the moving lights and the kinetic motor systems, and of course the sound. And yeah, here's one last picture from setting up and adjusting the last bits of the mirrors. They all have to be calibrated. So here you see calibration of all the moving lights onto one mirror. So every moving light has to be calibrated to all of the mirrors. So we are precisely hitting them while we actually move them in space. Mr. Cunding Ray arranging his 8-channel sound system, I think, in that exhibition. So we also need to be sure that the networking between the sound software and our visual software is always like 100% on point. And here you see us performing live performance. And you also can see it's not only me. I have a huge team, 30 people working with me to get those kind of shows built and on the road and operated. So I'm basically kind of the mastermind behind it, but there's many, many people working on making it happen. And hopefully the audience doesn't see any of that and just experiences the pure emotion and the pure joy of watching what's happening above their heads and not realizing what struggles we have to go through to kind of actually really make this happen and bring it to the crowds. We show it to more than 200,000 people over the last year on 3 locations. We were in Mexico, in Amsterdam, in Zurich, in Switzerland, and of course in Berlin, where we premiere most of our pieces. And we hope to bring it to many more locations. So this is the sun, happiness, obviously. And that's for now from my stuff. Thanks.
Thanks, Christopher. Wow, I'm overwhelmed actually. There were some questions I had which you read my mind, I guess, and you answered them while you were speaking. So I was curious what you meant by performance, because I haven't actually experienced this, not even in Riyadh, unfortunately, but you expressed that. So the performance is actually what you're doing behind the scenes to make this happen in the club or in the space, right?
Well, I mean, we have 2 different, it's kind of, if you play the piano, you can play different pieces. So we have this kind of instrument and we can play it different ways. So what we show in Riyadh is the exhibition. So you go in at any time, you can stay as long as you want, and the whole thing works in a kind of evolving loop. So there's no beginning and no end, and we cannot know when you step in. And then we have the live performance version where there's clearly a beginning and an end. So we can have a really nice build-up where we start with small elements and then we get bigger and more intense, and we have a dance moment and so on. So it's really like a concert and has a different kind of intensity and vibe. So these are 2 kind of faces of the same art installation.
That's so cool. I was wondering how, because I didn't realize until you said it now also that you sell these units. So I was wondering what happens when, it was a really intense collaboration process between you and Kanding. And like after that happens and you kind of let go of this piece and you sell it to another place, what happens? Are you training people to operate that?
Yeah, I mean, we're not selling the art piece Scala. We're selling the motors. You can buy the motors or mirrors, and we have all kinds of other light elements. It's not only restricted to moving mirrors. We have balls, we have lines, we have triangles, we have video screens. You can move basically everything you can think of, and you can power. And then, yes, of course, we train the local teams. Like at Hakkasan Club in Las Vegas, there's 2 operators. And everything is controlled from a lighting desk at the night. So we program patterns, pre-program them, but they can change everything on the fly. So it's very flexible. They can create themselves. So there's one version where I'm the artist and I'm creating with it. And in the other case, we give it to other people to kind of get wild with their own imagination.
That's so cool. It's a model. That's really inspiring, actually. I think a lot of people, that'll be a good takeaway. Thank you, Christopher, for that. I'll get back to you during the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. أهلين ناصر.
هلا والله.
كيف حالك?
والله بخير كيف حالك?
Nice to see you. Nice to speak to you as well. You're the voice of Saudi right now. We left you to the last because here you're obviously a rising star in electronic music. It's that's just a fact. It's so exciting to be speaking with you, and I know that you're going to show us some of your work. I just wanted to kind of mention that you are self-taught as well. Like, I think this is really important. And so when you talk about your work, can you also speak about how you got to that point? You're an artist and a designer and a businessman like everybody else on the team. It's I'm curious to know how you handle all of that.
First of all, I'm quite happy to be amongst this distinguished panel. Thank you guys for having me. Thanks to Noor Festival. It's been quite an interesting journey. I started out very simply with maybe just an acoustic guitar, and things evolved very fast after that. I was also lucky to be in a place like Miami, where it's an amazing music environment, and I was exposed to a lot of that scene. So it helped me get into that world very fast. And then at some point when I got into the music and I also started DJing, I felt the need to have like some kind of visuals, and I wanted some kind of light show behind me while I played. And I also wanted it to be, original content and authentic. So I started learning visuals, and that's how I kind of got into both of those fields in university, And then after that, fast forward a few years, of course, coming back to Saudi, I did what most people do. I work with the family business type of thing. And then a few years later, after I noticed the crazy trend of Saudi opening up to the entertainment world, my family gave me like the green light to pursue my passion. And I've been doing that ever since now for 3 years. I started with my startup. It was called Gleam KSA. And now 3 years later, we're doing a rebranding, calling it Desert Dream, which is like the next evolution of this brand. So I'm happy to be working in that field now here in Saudi, across multiple cities. Lately, I've been going a lot to Sharqiya, Khubar, working with Ithra a lot. Also had the pleasure with working with Misk. Yeah, it's really exciting industry, very new kind of industry in Saudi Arabia. So when I arrived, there wasn't really much of a sound industry to begin with. Not too many people, even in the film industry, put a priority on the sound itself. So I'm happy to be part of that change. And now maybe let's start cueing the first video, show them the intro. Cool. So that piece is something I did with Arabic letters for the first time, using Arabic letters with this program Touch Designer. I got into it maybe a year ago, and then I wanted, naturally when I start doing something new, I want to somehow incorporate culture or try to do something local or my own identity to be part of it. So I tried to figure out how to do the Arabic letters with the program. That didn't work out. So in the end, for example, I had to get like actual 3D renderings of letters instead of typing them, just because it's, if it's a rendered piece, it's you don't have to write it, or the program doesn't have to put it in, so that was an easy way to translate that. And this is something you face a lot sometimes when doing the art, to do something Arabic, or it's can be difficult. And then now maybe we'll show them the next video. Let's show the Transcendence piece. Okay, so that was the piece I did with Misk in Riyadh, and it was part of the imprint exhibition. They approached me to do, first of all, some artworks, which was not related to, a massive audiovisual installation. I gave them a couple of proposals, and, it was like a normal exchange. But then suddenly they approached me with, you know what, let's do something huge. And my friend over there, Abdullah Zamel, who was leading the project, he had a vision to do something that's never been done here, like some kind of immersive, massive LED wall type of interactive thing. And, naturally, first thing I panic. I'm like, how do I pull this off? And I basically Transcendence is this was Transcendence 2.0. The 1.0 version was the first time I exhibited in an exhibition with 2139 exhibition with the Saudi Art Council here in Jeddah. So that room was a much simpler setup than this one. It was only one projector and a simple graphic. And what I do is I put contact microphones beneath the floor. And these microphones are waiting for just signals of on and off from people to be walking there. So when they start walking, they will trigger sounds. And when these sounds are triggered, also the projection will react to that sound. So when I did that, the hard part was the actual composition. How do you create something that's, not too basic, not too boring, but something evolving, kind of a soundscape, kind of very immersive? So I tried to put together a lot of the skills that I learned, with film scoring / music composition to come up with, a wholesome composition that was very engaging. And at the same time, the hardest part was, of course, to relate it to something local. So I used a vocal, voiceover from a friend of mine. She wrote me and her, we wrote the kind of lyrics or the sentences. So to have a storytelling aspect. So a lot of the artworks that I work with are inspired by the idea of randomness and chaos or controlled chaos. So, I'm heavily inspired by visionaries like John Cage, where they always talk about, the nature of sound and how in nature itself, the randomness of sound at any given point or any given space is so chaotic that it could never repeat itself twice. You can never go at a street intersection and hear the exact same sequence of sounds twice, there's way too much happening in the universe. There is literally a random number generator out there that is constantly churning out events of all kinds, So, my passion is to pursue this number and to kind of translate it into something useful or, how to use this chaos and control it in a way. So, for example, in that composition, to control the chaos, there are various elements. Some of them are made by synthesized sound in real time from synthesizers, and some of them are recorded samples. So what I would do is I would make them all the tones work in a musical scale, so it doesn't cause too much dissonance, or just so it can become musical and palpable and nice, instead of something if it wasn't in a key or something, it would be too suspenseful. So to make it beautiful and nice, we could put it maybe in a minor scale or a major scale and have all those elements interact. And then each microphone would be responsible for different sound banks so that the experience could be varied enough. Some of them will be when you step on this mic, you will trigger the vocal. And when you step in the mic in the center, you will actually trigger environmental sounds.
Yeah.
Which are coming out of 4 speakers. We had a quadraphonic sound system. And when you step every time in the center, it will turn from the streets of New Delhi to the beaches of Jeddah to the deserts of Riyadh, constantly shape-shifting.
I'm gonna put you on the spot and be like, we have to collaborate, because there's a lot of things that you're saying that I'm really digging, and things that I think about also all the time. I was gonna ask you about collaborations, and you did answer that. I wanted to ask you, do you feel like, kind of pressure to represent, do you feel like is it something you're genuinely curious, El Tayyar, it's so strong right now for arts and music and everything. It's so overwhelming. So do you feel like sometimes you have to compromise or you have to shift something, or, you get what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel definitely always have to compromise and work within your boundaries, and especially difficult sometimes. Because for me, usually my ideas start as sketches or technical setups, It's not really about concept. It's not about the idea first. I would just stumble upon some idea, some cool trick, and then turn that and adapt it to any topic, So definitely always adapting and always changing your ideas. And when it comes to collaboration, for sure, one of the coolest topics, or one of the coolest things to do, is to collaborate. And it definitely depends on the collaborators. Not everybody works together well. If somebody has similar tastes and similar skill sets, I think people complement each other for sure.
I'm so excited to see what else you come up with, Nasser. And we're all really proud of you here. يعني يعطيك العافية. Allah يوفقك. Honestly, thank you for sharing that. This is a really good point to bring everybody back in, if that's okay, because I do have a question for everyone, and it's kind of like a hi everyone. It's a debunking question, okay? So please be patient with me. So AI is kind of a contested term, I guess, and there's a lot of people that really, across history, anything new, like think that our consciousness is going to be taken over, machines are taking over. I know this is a boring question, but can you debunk that by speaking about your process? When do humans kind of come into that process? The human interactivity is the core of everything, but when is there like enter machine, exit human, or enter human and exit machine? Christopher, can you start with that? Because I saw you shaking your head.
Well, because I'm a big adversary of AI, because there's no AI, there's no artificial intelligence. Everything is man-made. All the machines, only people who are not working on those machines see them as these kind of like not to understand things that look alien to them. But the engineers who built them, for them, it's total logic. And I have, 10 engineers working here, and we build machines and we write softwares, and I understand code. And there's nothing even close to being artificial intelligence, or it's all artificial, but nothing of it is intelligence. Mm-hmm. There's machine learning. There's all kind of, the people say I'm teaching the software and the software is learning. That's bullshit. Even if you teach the software 1,000 cat pictures, it still doesn't know what a dog is, mm-hmm. and so on. So this is very, very limited. It's pure processing power, and that's kind of something that we cannot understand, because some things that a computer can process and the volume the computer can process, that's awe-inspiring. But there's still not this spark of intelligence in it that we should be afraid of. So far, we are in complete control of those systems, complete control.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for debunking it that way.
Sorry.
No, it's great. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Bruno, what do you have to say about that? About what Christopher said or the question?
Well, it's a complicated question, of course, and where the human ends and the AI begins. And I think to really answer this question, we can answer to this question about like our approach to AI today, but it will be very different than the approach that we will have tomorrow as technology evolves. And of course, I agree with Christopher that like today AI is a tool, is built by people, and these people know how it works, how it thinks, and how to use it. There's a level of complexity because AI processes a huge amount of data, and sometimes it finds patterns and way of optimizing tasks that can go beyond what the creators of that machine can foresee. And we're seeing this increasing really quickly. Then, if it's about art, then is a pleasant surprise. So an AI that helps us composing or that composes on its own is interesting. It's nothing more than interesting, I guess, or boring, based on taste. Then, of course, if you think how much AI is actually invading other sides of your life, and I think people don't realize how much it's already actually doing so right now, like from whether you're gonna get a mortgage to whether you're gonna have a job next year or not, or is your CV going to be read by someone, or actually is going to be ditched, or there's like so much going on basically now that is a kind of used by humans, but it's filtered by AI or optimized by AI, and it's interesting. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we kind of try to speculate of what can happen, the better it is, because we don't want to just see this coming and not being prepared. I think, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to.
And I just want to, you know, like I said, that in my personal art and technology, I actually tend always to put the human first. So for me, AI in my work is an enabler for what I try to enable people to do, you know, the visitors of the installations or the people that play the instruments that I build. For me, is an enabler and a way to democratize music, to democratize to share emotions, you know, in different ways. But of course, this can change as technology evolves.
Yep, that's beautiful. Thank you. Nasser, I think, Nasser, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, sure. I think we always have to distinguish it for what it is as a tool, you know, first and foremost. So a tool will just do exactly what it's intended. It will be very difficult for it to go outside of its own scope. And besides that, you know, especially like nowadays we have something like GPT-3, which is the most the most advanced AI type of algorithm, which claims to have something in the neighborhood of 480 billion synapses, something like that, this is the number of inputs it has.
Yeah.
Compared to the human brain, which has around 1 trillion synapses. So GPT-3 has jumped so far already ahead in its evolving. Used to have less synapses, and you know, with time it's getting exponentially larger. So let's say it does reach to the point of 1 trillion, it becomes human capability of inputs, but that's still only what it can do. It cannot go further than that and analyze more data and do more things. You know, I'm not an expert in AI, but I'm just happy that nowadays I'm using AI from a very consumer point of view. Mm-hmm. So just using interfaces like Runway ML, which already has the built-in algorithms, and I'm using, you know, the silly image synthesis stuff, you know, nothing too complicated. But that's what it is today. It's like, it's nice to have access to it, that it's reaching people like me who are not computer engineers, and we can use it in our art or whatever.
That's a really cool answer. Thank you for that. I was going to say, okay, so before I go into questions from the audience, really quick question. Okay, I'm a person who doesn't understand technology. I'd like you to like throw just any kind of tech that you're using or discovering at me so that I can research it later. Christopher, go.
So no, I mean, Touch Designer was mentioned. That's what we're also using. That's an interesting thing, I think, of today, and because it allows artists to create software in a very visual way. You don't need to have to be an expert in coding or write text-based code, which I was never really good at. But I can understand the visual system that Touch Designer is using to create your softwares. You can, on top, of course, you can also write code there. You can dive in really deep, but it's also a very flexible tool for artists, and it has this built-in, let's call it AI tools that allow you to do, all those things that are a bit trendy now at this moment. So Touch Designer is a real powerful tool to basically, it's a toolbox to create your own software. And that's extremely helpful. And you can start super simple. It can get really complicated. You can spend your life on that.
Awesome. I wrote that down.
Yeah, I second that for sure.
Yeah? Okay, you second that. Okay.
And I have a workshop in ITRA coming up, so you can join us.
For Touch Design?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I'll join you. Okay, Bruno.
So what kind of technology I use or I suggest you to read or what?
Either one, because I'm not going to get any of them anyway. So what should I? but you know, like what can I use? What can I use? You know?
Yeah. Well, for my work, I often build my own software because it's probably my problem. I guess is that I can't stop, you know, coding and actually wasting a lot of time on that rather than on sound and lights. But well, one cool trick that I use is it's called audio physical modeling synthesis. So it's this idea of basically creating sounds that sounds like real instruments. So you know, I can tell this little story maybe like when you hear a sound, like say the sound of a guitar or a piano. It's actually the impact of two bodies, an exciter like your plectrum and the resonator like the string of the guitar, for example, in this case. And audio physical modeling basically kind of allows you to simulate the sound of the string of the guitar, but you can excite this guitar with the vibrations you make when you touch physical objects, basically. So that's kind of the technique I use in my installation, if you want to Google it.
I will. Thank you. I wrote audio physical modeling synthesis and build your own software. So that's really good advice.
You should check out Raspberry Pis.
Raspberry Pis. Okay, cool. Raspberry Pis. I'm struggling if whether I should ask you my last question or ask or give you questions from the audience. But I'm not going to be selfish, so I'll just contact you guys later. So this is a question for Bruno and Nasser. Christopher has mentioned the impact that 90s techno music has had in his production. What music or musicians influenced your production? Nasser.
Well, I think it's a big question. There's a lot of scope of different musicians. But I'm heavily inspired by, for example, the techniques of Richie Houghton. They have a huge role, not necessarily the music of Richie Houghton, because it's very techno and old school. I moved on from that, but his techniques. So the way he plays live, it has a huge impact on the way I play live, because for him, it's like he approaches it from not a typical DJ perspective, but to deconstruct all the music that he plays and creates a different experience, like a live feeling. So that's something in the core. For the classic house music, I would say definitely influenced me. I still chase those classic sounds, like those old school drum machines and synthesizers. So definitely influenced me a lot. Maybe not particular artists, but
Thank you, Bruno.
Yeah, well, it's a huge question. There's so many inspirations, right? It could be the musician that play down the street, or it can be, the biggest composers. I guess I had this from the 90s as well. I guess we are the same generation. In terms of electronic music, I've been fascinated by all the artists that came out of that Warp Records kind of British scenery. So Aphex Twin, Wetheka, Plaid, who I had a opportunity to collaborate as well. And then on the other side of the spectrum, more like I'm always been really inspired by the people that try to take electronic music outside of the computer, outside of the that very rigid scheme of being in front of a screen, and actually trying to play with it live and try to improvise and have the kind of jazz kind of swing to electronic music. So just to give a name, I think Flying Lotus, LA-based artist also is one that inspired me a lot.
That's awesome. Okay. So there's another question. What do you guys think about the vinyl revival? Christopher?
Nothing. I mean, I'm a techno kid, but I was always interested in the forward thinking about technology, and I never understood why in the clubs they were playing vinyl. And I'm really happy it's gone, because it makes no sense. It's beautiful and it looks nice and it feels nice, but from a sound perspective, I truly believe we are far beyond that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, this retro revival. When I started taking pictures and making videos, I bought a Super 8 camera, which is the generation of my parents, and you use film and so on. You always need to understand where it all comes from, what you're currently using. So as a historical kind of education instrument and so on, I totally understand why younger people get into it. But from a musical standpoint, it makes no sense anymore. It's a dinosaur.
Okay. Okay, Nasser, sorry, I'm just going really quickly with the questions. Nasser, how do you deal with mixing Western music and Eastern music to please our audience?
That's a great question. It took me a long time to get any of those factors right, Yeah. I think it just came with experience and dealing with a lot of corporate clients. So the corporate clients here, they have a very type of one thing in mind. You know, they all have the same kind of expectation for an advertisement. So they all want the Arabic touch, and they all want the most cheesy commercial possible. So it helps a lot to work with this stuff.
Thank you. I'm gonna ask my selfish question. So I'm a singer. And I always kind of like I'm improvisational because obviously I'm not trained. There's no training here, but so I'm much more comfortable with a band. What kind of advice would you say about like inserting the human voice into electronica, Bruno?
What kind of advice?
Yeah, like, you know, how do you see it happening? Or give me an example of someone I should listen to so that I can, you know, be inspired to go into electronica.
Oh my God, it's such a huge, broad, but you know, like it's really what inspires you. Like I guess just listen to the people you like in terms of music, in terms of songs, and then try to reverse engineer that. Say, you know, try to figure out if they're using an auto-tuner or they're not, if they're using a vocoder, you know, whatever it is, or if it's like a natural voice. And I guess just follow your inspiration, I'd say.
Okay, so play. Okay, I'll do that because I always have an idea that, you know, DJs work with only specific types of vocalists. What about you, Christopher?
I never honestly worked with vocalists. I'm really the pure kind of the techno kid. So I'm really on very hard abstract techno, not even house music where they have vocals and stuff like that. So I have no real advice in that direction because it's not part of my education, basically.
Okay, good to know. So I'm hearing different perspectives. We'll go to you, Nasser, and then we'll close this session.
Yeah, I think nowadays the coolest thing to do is to be a solo act, get in with the Ableton world, and you can do your live looping, you can do layers, your voice and real time. That would be the approach for electronica for sure. You can check out Rachel K. Collier.
Okay.
She's an excellent act that does that by herself, one woman show, you know.
That's awesome. This has been really inspiring. I've just written everything you guys have said down. I thank you. We've reached the closing. Unfortunately, I could, you know, talk to you guys for another 3 hours easily. You probably won't want to do that. But I just want to say thank you so much. And we have this really cool Nasser goodbye virtual.
Yeah, I'm waving to you from the Matrix.
From the Matrix. Thank you for sharing, like literally right now, your experiences and your direction, your thoughts, your work. I hope that we can see you here again. I hope to be receiving you guys in Riyadh. Thank you for everyone who listened and heard us today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please check out the other talks. Christopher, Bruno, Nasser, everybody, stay healthy, stay united, and good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.